I'm John Roese, Chief Technology Officer and Chief AI Officer of Dell Technologies, and welcome to our 2025 predictions. So let's jump into the predictions for 2025. The first one is the rise of Agentic AI. Sometimes I say the word of the year in 2025 is going to be agentic, a term we didn't even understand 6 months ago. And the reason for it is that we're actually pivoting into kind of a third wave of AI. Up until now, the generative AI cycle has primarily been about reactive AI systems. You ask them a question, they give you an answer. You give them a task, they do something. But it's very much you as the human being are very central to activating and instructing them, and they are just responding to you. And that's great. It works really well, and we're using it for all kinds of things. But there's a new architecture, a new set of technologies, which still use language models that have some new frameworks around them called agentic, in which we really believe that what if we could take some of these AI systems, these language models, but instead of just having them react, we could give them things like memory and chain of reasoning. We could give them a knowledge graph so they would have kind of history, not just a moment in time experience. And if we did that, we could then hand tasks to them and allow them to run as a collective autonomously to accomplish some level of work. A good example would be a chatbot today can answer questions about how to run a CNC machine in a factory. An agentic architecture of the future could actually learn how to run a CNC machine and then run it. And so we know that this is a profound change, but it's very real and it's happening today. And so it will bring new concepts like memory and chain of reasoning. It will be more of a distributed system because it's a collective of AIs working together. So it will likely land on not just data centers, but AI PCs. It will have what's called function serving, where it's no longer just about managing information and answering questions. These agents can reach out into the real world and control a device or interact with the real world and do something. More importantly, these agents fundamentally are able to operate fairly autonomously. They do not require a human in the loop. In fact, there's a term that we start to use. First generation generative AI, the human was in the loop. In agentic architectures, the human is on the loop. You are not doing the work, you are the manager, the leader, but once you delegate the task to the agents do the work for you. If that sounds like a big deal and a big change, it is, but it's going to happen in 2025. It is fundamentally a very real technology. We've already built them in Dell, we're using them, and we are very excited because it allows an incredibly significant increase in the productivity and functionality of the AI landscape, and it is not 5 years in the future. It will absolutely happen this year. So the second prediction is that we've been on a journey for enterprise AI, generative enterprise AI, since ChatGPT came out. But it's important to recognize the first year of generative AI in the enterprise was kind of a dud. And the reason for it is that the only tool we had were large language models that ran in public AI services. And while that's interesting to do some experiments, it's not a way to actually do enterprise AI because we're dealing with our proprietary data. We want to run it on-prem. We didn't have the tools. However, over the last year and a half, those tools have become real. We not only have developed methodologies to know what to do, but we also know how to do it. We have tools like retrieval augmented generation, which allows us to bring our proprietary data with large language models to accomplish tasks. We now have agentic architectures emerging and becoming real. And so the reality is, after about a year and a half of kind of figuring it out, the last year or so, most of us who are at the front end of this cycle have actually started to put things into production. And while Dell may be very advanced versus maybe some other companies in terms of our aggressive adoption of these technologies, the fact that when we put these into production, we did not have to break the laws of physics. We used primarily off-the-shelf technology. We were able to solve very specific problems. And more importantly, we got to very specific material results. And we were able to do that as mere mortals. And that tells me that when I talk to customers around the world, when I look at the patterns, we are about to escape from POC prison in many enterprises and actually start getting things into production. The reason I'm confident on that is because we did that last year. We as Dell have seen what happens, and once you get over that hump, the flywheel starts moving. You are now generating ROI, you have resources to do more AI projects, and things really start to get exciting. Our prediction, 2025 is a year that a very large portion of enterprises are going to tip out of that POC prison and into production simply because the maturity of the technology, the learnings, the methodologies have all come together in a way that gives us a lot of confidence that you can actually do this stuff and get value from it, and you don't really have to do anything extraordinary in terms of technical effort or cost to accomplish the kind of outcomes that we've seen. The third prediction for this year is very different. It deals with sovereign AI. And what sovereign AI is this concept that every country in the world, every organization, if you will, that represents a population, it could be a state, it could be a country, it could be an international body, they need to have a position on AI. And today that is not entirely clear what most of their positions are. In fact, we have some that are very aggressive on national adoption of AI and some that are doing nothing. But the important thing is, over the last year, as that term materialized, we've actually matured to understand that there are really several ways in which governments around the world can choose to participate or drive the adoption of AI and the impact on their society. It's no longer just about will they build data centers, it's much more nuanced. And so we've actually seen that there are three patterns. There are some customers, and in this case, some nations and organizations, that will absolutely build AI infrastructure for their government because they believe that they ought to have that infrastructure in their environment. That means building data centers, deploying GPUs, and it becomes a national asset. There aren't a lot doing that. That's a very expensive and complex process, but there are some that absolutely believe that is necessary. In addition to that, though, there are probably more governments around the world that are actually trying to make that governmental investment not for governmental outcomes exclusively, but they believe that in order to accelerate their industrial base, the companies that exist in that country, it is important that the government assist in creating the infrastructure. If you have a petrochemical industry, but they don't have the capacity, the data center capacity to train models that will make them more competitive, they're at a disadvantage. But if the national government invests in that critical infrastructure and shares it with industry, then suddenly your national oil industry has a competitive advantage versus someone else. So we're seeing that pattern where it is really the national strategy is not to just achieve governmental outcomes, it's to create foundations that accelerate the industrial base adoption of AI, which really creates competitiveness at an economic level. And then there is the third. And the third doesn't involve building data centers or deploying infrastructure at all. It just means that the government takes a very active role in facilitating the adoption of AI by their country and by their industry. This could be aggressive training implementations, or some of the Asia-Pacific governments I've worked with actually are doing fantastic work of actually being the convening authority for their industry. There's one country that showed me a program that they've kicked off where they have the top 100 indigenous companies in their country that are now coming together as a collective, facilitated by the government, and the government is bringing companies like Dell in to talk to them with the sole purpose of raising their capability, their understanding, and their ability to execute independently of the government, so the government becomes the facilitator. Now, these three models are not mutually exclusive. You may have countries that do all three of them. They may do one or the other. All of them are sovereign AI strategies. And so because we now have clarity that there's different ways to do this and they all make sense for different reasons, our prediction isn't that sovereign AI happens, it's that almost every government in the world develops a sovereign AI strategy that looks like one of the things I just talked about. And that's very exciting because if you know where your government policies are and what their role is, it becomes much more simple for an industry or an organization to know how to work with that government and to know what role they're going to play. So we think the government's role and the clarity of that role will improve dramatically this year as they develop different, hopefully all very helpful sovereign AI strategies to kind of accelerate the overall AI cycle. And then number 4 on the list is an observation, and this is, when the AI cycle happened, we treated it as yet another technology. You know, we had quantum and AI and digital twins and advanced compute and client devices. There were many different technologies all happening in parallel, and they occasionally bumped into each other, but they were all treated as separate topics. What we are predicting now is it is very clear that there is one dominant topic, and it's called AI. And every other technology in the world is now framed in context of what does it do or what does it depend on from AI. If you think about some of the technologies I just listed, quantum computing is no longer a separate computing paradigm. We know that it potentially could be the technology that dramatically accelerates the efficiency and functionality of AI, but more importantly, we know that AI can actually accelerate quantum development by solving problems humans can't solve. When we think about security and things like zero trust, by itself, it's interesting, but if you're going to build a new AI infrastructure, if you didn't build it using zero trust principles, you'd be making an enormous mistake. And so these two are inseparable. Edge, we used to think of edge as computer systems that run industrial systems or do stuff in the wild. And that's all true, except the stuff they're doing almost universally is AI driven. There are almost no edge use cases today that do not process data using machine intelligence to do something that is in the realm of AI. And so these are completely inseparable. More importantly, to make AI work globally, we can't do it just in data centers. We have to distribute it to where the data is, so we have a dependency on edge. Digital twins are now actually just part of the AI environment. In fact, you don't really need digital twins as a standalone technology because your AI systems almost automatically create them, but all of the learnings about digital twins are helping us create those digital representations in AI, and so those two have almost blurred together. The telecom ecosystem used to be a separate topic from AI. The biggest trend in telecom is the application of AI to dramatically automate and simplify the way that our telecom infrastructures work, and most of us who have a long history in telecom know there is no path to 6G or 7G if we rely on human beings to do all the work. The networks are just too big and too complex. We must have effective AI, otherwise we can't even build and operate them. And then finally, the PC. You know, we used to think of the PC as a separate industry, the client industry, and today what we've found is with the advent of the AI PC, we need all the MIPS on all the devices. We need compute anywhere and everywhere, and we need it all to work on behalf of these AI systems that we're deploying so they can run efficiently and effectively. But we also know that a lot of the AI in the world doesn't belong in a data center. It needs to go with you. It needs to be very tied to you. It needs to act on your behalf. And so what we've seen is a fundamental shift in not just what we run on PCs, but PC architecture. Modern PCs that are being built today are different than the PCs we built 2 years ago. They have neural processing units, they are designed to run AI workloads, and that has created a fundamental linkage between the evolution of AI and the evolution of the personal computer. They are now tied together almost inseparably forever. So it doesn't matter which technology we talk about, ask yourself, is it an enabler for AI? Is it dependent on AI? Or is it both? But what you will struggle to find today are almost any technologies that are not tied back to this AI thread. The last prediction is around people. And, you know, we've talked about the job disruptions of AI theoretically. And the funny thing is, there was no empirical data. People predicted that AI would destroy a bunch of jobs. Funny enough, in one of our earlier predictions, we're now seeing AI go into production. And what we found is, yes, it does disrupt some jobs, but it also creates immense productivity, it scales businesses, and it creates new jobs. It creates robot keepers and AI explainers and software composers. Lots of jobs start to emerge once you have these new tools and capabilities, and we now have real data as people put them into production. At Dell, in general, yes, we become more efficient, but we're also growing and scaling, and we're finding new capabilities, and there's entirely new classes of jobs that are being built to make sure that our AI systems work the way we want and are able to be delivered. And there's entirely set of job changes on people who use the AIs because the way they do their work changes as you distribute it differently between people and machines. The bottom line, though, is that as a prediction, this is no longer someone else's topic. Every person in almost every enterprise must start to really understand, at least at a rudimentary level, what AIs are, how they work, and more importantly, how they impact and change their job function, the way they work as a collective, and how their companies operate. And, you know, last year, people knew a little bit, and there were a few people that knew a lot. And as we go into 2025, we expect a lot of people to know a reasonable amount about it because it's touching just simply more of the modern enterprise. And so the prediction is that AI becomes an essential skill for everybody. There's no one who can ignore this as we go forward, and that's probably a good thing, but it will take a little time and effort to get there. Now, the conclusion behind all of this is, look, AI has become the singular thread of the technology industry. Almost everything that is happening to either enable it or is a byproduct of what it is either doing or potentially will do for us. And so that grand evolution from a world of fragmented technology to a world where our entire technology ecosystem really is very unified around one goal. We want to improve productivity and build more intelligent systems, and the way that we're going to do that is by applying AI technologies to our total technology ecosystem to really change the balance of work that's done by people and work that's done by machines, with the net goal of dramatically improving the productivity of every company and the entire world. That is a very, very exciting path forward, and what we're seeing is whether it's the role of government or the underlying technology to agentic, or what the skills people need to have, or how enterprises are actually getting into production, or even what the adjacent technologies are doing, that common thread of AI is inescapable, and quite frankly, that's the one central theme for 2025.